Okay, good morning. I hope you had a relaxed time on board. Not a very great ship in terms of size, but nevertheless, a relaxing one. It's almost 1 hour to a place called Zanziskans. Now, what is Zanziskans? So, we actually recreated. It was already there, but they've added more buildings, which was old. They relocated. They created a typical Dutch villa. You won't feel it at all. Okay? It's really nice. Now, why are we going there? Because we wanted to give you an experience of a typical Dutch village in its purest form. So what do you do there? You go there, you can see how the wooden shoes are made, which is very cultural. You'll see those cheese things, n number of varieties of cheese. Okay, you can taste, you can buy, things like that. You can, hopefully the cycle shop is open. You can actually hire a bicycle. That's how typical people in Dutch live. They're always on cycle. So you could hire a cycle, go cycle around. That's possible. Stop by a windmill. Okay, there's a small entry to that. I think 5 euros or 10 euros to enter, but you get to know how the whole windmill functions. Okay. There's a coffee shop. The idea is to give you free time to engage. Okay. You like it. Everybody likes it. It takes approximately 1 hour, 10 minutes or so to reach the place. And from there, we move on to a lunch area, not very far. And after lunch, we come down to Amsterdam. So we're now going north. Okay. Later on, we'll come down little south to Amsterdam, and then further south to almost this place, but a little further to a place called near Rotterdam. Okay. So the program is easy, not very tight and things like that. Wanted you to go free and easy and enjoy the place.
Heb je gelegenheid om daar gebruik te maken van een hele mooie winkel en daar onder een is het alcohol is eigenlijk gehaald in het van puur alcohol wat je terugkrijgt. Dus dat varieert van tussen de 30 en 70% alcohol. Zo, en dan hebben we
Ja. The camouflage and vegetables.
Ja.
That's the order is it one? And most of the places in Netherlands is almost below sea level.
Below sea level?
Yes, that's right.
Same like Kutanag.
Okay. Same like Kutanag. Okay. And what you see in Amsterdam is actually all reclaimed land from the sea.
Oh. American കാണുന്നുണ്ട്.
Heeft een informatieboekje samengesteld over leven met een stoma. Vraag het gratis aan op stomaproefje.nl. Keukenkopen, opgelet. Het is hele keukens, al geld bij keuken. De Nova.
Okay, all along this country you'll see a separate path for cyclists. As you notice on the other side of the road. It's dedicated for them. It's throughout. When you go to Amsterdam, the one thing you have to be careful about are these cyclists. They run at very high speeds. They have more priority than people walking on the road. If you're not careful, it can hit you. It can really...
Goedemorgen, het is 9:30 in het weer. Eentje van Gita Spannenburg van Meteo.
In de loop van deze week wordt het heel erg heet. De aftrap is gelukkig wat bescheidener. Tot vanmiddag 24 tot 26 graden. Er is flink wat zon. Vanaf vanochtend ook afgewisseld door enige bewolking. En de wind die is zuidwest en matig tot vrij krachtig.
Very nice. ഇഷ്ടംപോലെ പശുക്കളുണ്ടെന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നെതർലാൻഡ്സിൽ.
കുട്ടനാടായിട്ട് ഭയങ്കര സമയമാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് അവർ ഡച്ച് പ്രൊജക്റ്റ്
ഡച്ച് പ്രൊജക്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, ശരി. പക്ഷെ എത്ര നീറ്റായിട്ടാണ് വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്, അതിൻ്റെ ആ ഹാർഡ് വർക്ക്. പറഞ്ഞു ലിച്ചുവിനെ വിളിക്കും, കുളത്തടി ഇതൊക്കെ കാണണ്ടേ അവിടെ. പിന്നെ
taalkursus bij Taaltaal. En we gaan gewoon kijken of dat allemaal gaat lukken. We regelen dat buiten de uitzending om natuurlijk. Als je vandaag nog eventjes aan het freelance in omgeving vertelt dat je hebt gevonden bij aan de Bakman Radio werkt.
Ja, dat is helemaal geen probleem. Ik woon in een klein laagje. Ja.
വെള്ളം ഒഴുകാനായിട്ടുള്ള സൈഡ്.
Area to reclaim, they found a lot of ships which had wrecked here, and that's how it got named Schiphol.
ഇതാണ് മെയിനായിട്ട്
main airport. Yes. Amsterdam.
Oh, Amsterdam Airport.
Schiphol Melissa.
One by one.
It's straight ahead of the bus. You can see a flight.
There's no...
It's taxiing. That's how the construction is here. You can see quite a lot of them coming one after the other.
Yes, yes, yes.
EasyJet. Carpet, പച്ച carpet ഇട്ടാണ് അല്ലേ? നമ്മള് അതൊന്നും കൃഷിയാണ്.
എൻ്റെ കൂളിംഗ് ഗ്ലാസ് എന്തിനാണ്? ആ എൻ്റെ ഇതെന്തിനാ എടുത്തത്? ഇത് ആരോട് പറഞ്ഞില്ല നിന്നോട്? ഈ സൈക്കിൾ ഷോപ്പ് അല്ല, ഇത് വിൻബിൻ അല്ലേ? ചീസ്
sprites, lots of you, still by help. Punto your back, muoverse la mano. Not finished, still wet. Madeira flat. Secca la madeira, 4 settimane. Dry 4 weeks, 1 settimana. Finalmente, spiego para niente quanto bisogna reach out. Pretty big. They are pretty big. Resistance to air is very strong, bueno, protection. Impermeable. Best way to wear it, have 1 finger space. Un dedo más grande. Alright, that's all. Thank you very much.
എല്ലാവരും പോയി സൈക്കിളൊക്കെ കയറാനുള്ള നിനക്ക് നിന്റെ ഫോട്ടോ എവിടെ അവിടെ എടുക്കാം
Tómame una foto, Michi, si es posible. Aquí no puedo, porque hay demasiada gente.
Poi addirittura te la vedete anche quello viola, c'è la lavanda, c'è la limone, c'è quello blu che invece ha il coppo, lo champagne, vino, zucca, sono fatti gusti veramente vari. L'unica differenza invece se dovete prendere il formaggio qui, questo fatto qui, quindi siccome molto olandesi sono vegetariani, allora preferiscono fare il taglio vegetale. Il taglio vegetale viene invece dall'estratto del vino. Noi invece siamo per il male. Ik hoor het
അവിടെ ഒരു വിൻഡ് മില്ല് ഓപ്പൺ മോളിൽ കയറാം. അങ്ങോട്ട് പോയില്ല. അവിടെ ഒരു വിൻഡ് മില്ല് അതിൻ്റെ മുകളിൽ കയറാം. ആ വാ, എനിക്ക് കയറണം. വേണേ കൊടുക്കാറുണ്ട്. 1 hourല്ലേ? അങ്ങോട്ട് പോട്ടെ. ഇത് പുറയില് വെള്ളമാണ് കേട്ടോ, പുറയില് വെള്ളമാണ്. ഫോട്ടോ അപ്പുറത്ത് പോയി ഫോട്ടോ. നമ്മളിപ്പോ പോയ സ്ഥലത്തിന്റെ പേരെന്താ?
Franciscans. Franciscans is this place called Franciscans. Now we are here somewhere. Then we go to Amsterdam, which is here. Finally we will stay. We'll come and stay this year. So tomorrow we go.
Cheese. After the cheese, we got an explanation about wooden shoes, and on the end, the best part, cheese tasting. And every morning we start with milking cows, yeah, because no cow, no milk, no cheese. And this is how they look like in Holland. We have special cows, birds like this. Yeah. In your country, over here, Holland, we have modern cow. And from the modern cow, we make Gouda and Eden cheese. Gouda is made from whole milk. Eden is made from skimmed milk, less fat. Yeah. We do also make goat cheese. Goat, yeah. Now after the work, the milking in the morning, we put milk in a container and we warm the milk up until 29 degrees. Then we put first bacterial culture into the milk.
looks similar like yogurt. After that we put a rennet inside. Rennet is vegetarian rennet and it makes the milk like pudding. When the milk is a pudding, then we start cutting the pudding with the 3 knives, turning around in the machine very slowly. And while cutting, cheese and water, curds and whey separate. 10% is curd, 90% is green water, whey. And whey we give it back to the animals to drink. The cows, the goats, the sheep, the tourists. Yeah? But don't worry, it's very healthy. There is a legend, they say that if you drink it every day, you will stay young. I am 93. The curds, the little pieces, we put them into these forks and then we press all the curds together for 2-3 hours. After pressing, we put the cheese behind in salt water. The water is 20% salt for the taste, for the right and to conserve cheese. A kilo, 12 hours in the water. Then we take cheese out, we put it on a wooden shelf and we put plastic around the cheese. The yellow coating is plastic. It's a liquid plastic. We dab it in with a sponge. This day on this side, the other day on the other side. 2 times on each side. After a month we can eat cheese. Then we have young cheese. 6 months, middle-aged. 1 year or longer for old cheese. This one is 2 years. Very hard. Good for eating. Good for bowling. Perfect for husband. Now we have cheese with garlic, pepper, lots of different ones, and this is also cheese, smoked cheese. Cheese first melted, later smoked. When we slice the cheese, we use the slicer, and in Holland we slice cheese in pieces like this. And this is nice when you use it in the kitchen for grating pizza and spaghetti. So now I thank you for your attention. Finito. Yes? You can follow me for the golden shoes. Follow me.
You
know why? The angry housewife. No, still 10% of all the Dutch people wears wooden shoes in Holland. The main purpose for them walking on wooden shoes, that wooden shoes are waterproof and they're very good safety shoes. And you know Holland is a very wet country. Starting with a piece of wood, the type of wood that we use is poplar wood. Fresh wood is easier to work with though. Later on it has to dry and then you get a very light finish one. In earlier days by hand with a big knife and this drill they used to make the entire shoe. And it took 4 hours. Nowadays machines make a pair in 4 minutes. Machinery works the same as how they make duplicates of a key. You see a template from which we will make a copy. Drill it out. Fresh. After this we dry it. When it's dry, we polish it. Finally we have a little wooden shoe for a child of 1 year old. They look big, but that's normal because we wear them big. If you like to try them on, you need 1 finger space behind it. That's the good size. Yeah? Well, inside we can try them on if you want. We got white shoes on which we can engrave names and decorations. Then for the lady up here, and when you come inside, I will write your name, make a nice little flower on it. We also have cheese to taste inside, so have fun. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice time. Thank you.
Ja, dat zijn allemaal niet mijn idee. Die weten wat ga je
Ja.
Ja, dat wordt gewoon. Is dat er precies zoals dat helemaal niet? Of weet jij meer dan ik?
What is this coating, brown coating?
It's smoked.
Smoke,
Yeah, you can eat it. A cheese stick, fried cheese with.
Smoked it on.
So to try the
Smoked
cheese.
on, brown coating. Smoked on. ഇത് ചെറിയൊരു മുളകല്ല ഈ കെച്ചപ്പ്
Ik wil wel yoghurt.
എല്ലാം പല ഫ്ലേവറിലാണോ അല്ലേ
അതെ
അത് അതില് എന്തോ ഈ മറ്റേ മഹീന വേറെ ഈ എന്തോ ഇല ഇട്ടിരിക്കുക
Harry gaat in de scheur.
ഹണിയാ
ഇത് വാങ്ങിക്കണം, എടുത്ത് വാങ്ങിക്കണം. ഈ പിടിച്ചോളെ.
ഓ ലഞ്ചാ ഇവിടെയാണോ ലഞ്ച്? ഞാൻ ഈ തപ്പി നടക്കുന്നില്ല.
I was a taxi. I took that. You can be seated and we bring you soup directly. We have nice local lunch for you. Welcome, welcome. You want to sit here as well or separately? What do you like? Oh, yeah, what do you like? You can be seated. Welcome, welcome. Soup is coming. We have local lunch. This is very nice butter with herbs. And the water is included. If you like other drinks like orange juice.
Actually, there's no traffic. Why is traffic? Yes, restaurant. So,
tomorrow Rotterdam, yeah? No, more Rotterdam.
no, I'm not doing that.
We go to Bruges.
Bruges, yes, Bruges is important. Bruges.
Metz? No, Metz.
Okay.
After tomorrow we come to Paris.
Yes, after tomorrow we have Paris. Evening we get over. Evening we go back to the hotel.
And tomorrow be very cold day.
നല്ല ഒതുക്കം അതുപോലെ തന്നെ
ഐറ്റംസ് ഒക്കെ
എല്ലാത്തിനൊരു ഒരു 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 ഡിവിനിറ്റി ഉണ്ട് അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഒരു ടേസ്റ്റ് ഐസ്ക്രീം ആണെങ്കിൽ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഇന്നലത്തെ
watch it. That's where the boats to go.
ഇത് റോഡാണ്. അപ്പുറത്തെ തോടാണ്. കനാൽ. കനാലിന്റെ കുറുകെ റോഡുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ആ റോഡ് പോക്കി. അത് പോകാൻ വേണ്ടി.
മണ്ണിട്ട് പോകാൻ വേണ്ടി ബോട്ട് പോകാൻ വേണ്ടി. അറിയാതെ അല്ലേ?
Yeah, this is opposite to Victoria. Victoria is on the right. Yeah. This is the vlog. Yes. This is such an earlier used to be.
By bus, and then we'll leave the bus at a different spot, and we will walk slowly to this place where you'll be collected at the end of our tour. Right? Sorry? Well, you aren't supposed to sit here, but it's your it's your responsibility.
Yes. Now you are a customer.
I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that people, passengers of touring cars in the Netherlands are supposed, yes, to use their safety belts. Only. But yes, always, always.
I know why you said that word. Always.
So we can go ahead.
Yes.
But I need to be careful about this.
They always are.
Yes.
Just,
No, the last time was different, man. It was very cool.
just ignore him. He's trying to do his job.
Yes, I know what. They're right, yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we are starting our tour near Amsterdam Central Station, and to be more exact, near a multi-storied bike parking lot, a three-storied bike parking lot for about 2,500 bikes. It's a free parking lot. Bikes are very popular in this country. It has to do with the fact that the most part of the Dutch territory is flat, so it's very easy to ride a bike. And secondly, most city centers in this country are very well preserved, and the streets are rather narrow. So traffic jams occur in the city centers very easily. You can see a water reservoir in front of you. So we're going to turn right and it will be on your left. It's a former bay of the North Sea. It's called the Eye, but it ceased to be a seawater reservoir at the end of the 19th century due to some hydrotechnical projects that, after the accomplishment of a couple of hydrotechnical projects. Now it's a freshwater reservoir, and tides have become history. You can see a very oddly looking white building on the other side. It's Amsterdam's Film Museum. It's on your left now. It stands next to a tower-like building. It's a former Shell laboratory. You can see swings on top of the roof, 3 swings. And people who like getting an adrenaline rush, they can swing on top and admire the city panorama. There's a slowly rotating restaurant under the ground-looking roof, and the building itself has been transformed into a hotel and apartment complex. So you can see a few modern buildings on your right. They stand on an artificial island that was created at the end of the 19th century within this water reservoir, and it used to be the place where the eastern part of Amsterdam's harbour used to exist until the end of the 70s of the 20th century. Nowadays it's been transformed into a hotel, office and residential area. You can see some construction cranes on your right at the site where the brand new headquarters of the Dutch company Booking.com is being built. On the left you can see the spot where river cruise ships stop en route. And a little bit further you can see a complex of concrete and glass buildings. It's a hotel, a music theatre
and also Amsterdam's passenger terminal, where large sea cruise and ocean cruise ships stop. Although Amsterdam is situated 27 kilometers from the sea, this water reservoir is deep and wide enough to let the biggest cruise ships existing in the world get in. The country you've arrived in is called the Netherlands, which means low lands. So the name of the country denotes its geographical situation. Lots of people living outside of the Netherlands often call this country Holland mistakenly. In fact, Holland is just a part of the Netherlands, comprising the territory of only 2 of the 12 provinces of the country, North Holland and South Holland. There used to be a single province until the 19th century, and in the Middle Ages, Holland was a county. So people, the Dutch people who live outside of Holland don't actually like being referred to as people from Holland, because regional identity is still very strong in this country and dialects are still vivid. This country is relatively small. In terms of total area, it's probably about 1/11 of the French territory, and it's home to over 17 million people. Not very many, some would say. Still, the Netherlands is the third biggest. Yes, it's the third biggest investor in the US economy after the United Kingdom and Japan. And it's also the 5th biggest export nation of the world after the United States, China, Japan and Germany. The Netherlands exports even more than Germany per capita. The local language, Dutch, is a West Germanic language. It's a close relative of English and German, among other languages. And to some people, it sounds like a funny mixture of English and German. So you can see modern buildings on your left. So this is still a former part, a decent part of the former harbour. And you can see not only modern buildings, but former multi-storied storehouses transformed into something else. Dutch is the native language to about 23 million people. It's the third most spoken Germanic language after English and German. It's spoken natively, chiefly in the Netherlands, of course, Belgium and Suriname. Suriname is a former Dutch colony in South America. In Belgium, in the neighboring Belgium, Dutch is native to over 60% of the population. The Dutch-speaking Belgians are called the Flemings or the Flemish, and some sources mention mistakenly the Flemish speak a language of their own, Flemish. Well, it's not true, because if the Flemish speak Flemish, then the Austrians also speak Austrian, and the Americans speak American, not English. The Mexicans speak Mexican instead of Spanish. You can see large light-colored building on your right. It was constructed in the 17th century, and it used to be the place where weapons and ammunitions were stored. Nowadays, it's home to the Amsterdam's Naval Museum. The canal we are traveling along used to be a spot where lots of shipbuilding facilities used to stand in the 17th and the 18th century when Amsterdam, the World Trade Center. One of those shipbuilding facilities is still remains. You're about to see it on your right, and it's turned into a museum just right behind the bridge on the right. The territory of the modern Netherlands was formed chiefly as a result of the independence war against the Spanish. The Netherlands became a part of the Spanish Empire in the 15th century, and Catholicism was the official religion everywhere in Western Europe. And Catholic priests tried to do their best to rid the people of their money. So at some point they started absolving people of their sins for money. The graver the sin, the more one had to pay. And people could even be absolved of their sins in advance, as long as they paid. So as the result, Catholic hierarchs got very rich, and most people lived in misery and poverty and suffered from diseases and starvation. So people started protesting against this practice. That's how Protestantism came into existence. And Protestant preachers started spreading new values. They said it was a sin to show off one's wealth, and even abundantly rich people had to wear plain clothes, live in plain buildings, and travel in plain carriages. Secondly, they said they negated the necessity to give much money to the church, because it's a spiritual institution, so the church doesn't need much money by definition. And finally, they negated the necessity. You can see a windmill, a typical element of the Dutch landscape. You're going to have a stop. You're going to have a stop later on near another windmill to take pictures. So windmills were very widely used here until the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, not only to grind grain into flour, but also to grind all kinds of colored minerals, which were used as raw materials for paint. There were also oil windmills, where oil was pressed out of oily seeds, tobacco mills, where snuff tobacco was ground. Markets on your left. They sell everywhere there, food and non-food. As far as food is concerned, it arrives from all over the world, because Amsterdam's population is very multi-ethnical. Amsterdam is home to 176 nationalities. The canal on your right used to mark Amsterdam's boundary from the 17th till the end of the 19th century. So the city center, the official city center, is behind that canal. And we are traveling through Amsterdam's district, which is called East. So these territories were annexed by Amsterdam at the end of the 19th century. And they lie east to the last city wall. So this area is, so as I've said before, Amsterdam is a multi-ethnic city. More than a half of its population are the first and second generation immigrants. Amsterdam is also the most populous city in the country. Its population is 870,000 people. So we are approaching the spot where the Dutch film director Theo van Gogh was killed 11 years ago by the son of Moroccan immigrants. So Theo van Gogh is actually a relative of the famous Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. He made a short film submission about the submissive role of women in Muslim cultures. And the young man didn't like it. He thought that the film director insulted the Islam by his film, and so he shot him dead and then cut his throat from ear to ear. You can see another recently developed residential areas on your left. Amsterdam is booming. Its population is increasing by 11,000 people every year. There was time when Amsterdam wasn't very comfortable for its inhabitants, and people were leaving this city en masse, but a lot has improved ever since. You're about to notice that the road we are traveling along is going down. The thing is, we are about to enter the bottom of a former lake. This lake was drained in the 17th century. A big chunk of the Dutch territory was claimed from water reservoirs. There is even a whole province in the country that fully lies on an artificial island and an artificial peninsula. So by the 17th century, Amsterdam had become the world trade capital. And Amsterdam's rich merchants had a mansion built within the city itself, but the money kept pouring in, and so did the wishes, and at some point they wanted to have a countryside house. But the territory surrounding Amsterdam consisted of lakes and swamps, so there was no place, there was no space to have those houses, summer houses, constructed on. And so they decided to drain the territory, the outskirts of Amsterdam, by using disassemblable water mills. So when the wheel of the water mills scattered around the perimeter of swamps and lakes didn't reach the water surface any longer, the water mills got disassembled, put lower. You're about to see one of those former 17th century summer houses on your right. And then they were reassembled and kept draining the swamp or the lake. And so they repeated this operation. They performed this operation in several stages until they reached the very bottom. And then the former bottom, lake or bottom or drain swamp was used as arable land and for construction. The area of Amsterdam we are traveling through is populated by relatively rich people. Not the very elite but still rather well-to-do people. You can probably tell this by the architecture of the buildings on both sides of the street we are traveling through. This area was also the place where the future famous Dutch football player Johan Cruyff used to live, and where he started to play football. This area is also the place where the former Dutch Ajax football or soccer team used to play and to train until the brand new stadium was constructed in 1996 in a different part of the city. We are approaching one of Amsterdam's cemeteries. You will see it on your right. In this country, it's a normal thing to hire a grave. Graves are usually hired for the period of 20 years, and the hire can be prolonged, but if it doesn't, the coffin gets buried out and gets reburied into a mass grave on the territory of the same cemetery. It has to do with the fact that the country is overpopulated, and besides the ground is very rich in water, so you can't. He was very popular in the 60s and the 70s. So we need to take the Spanish didn't like it because they thought of themselves as of Catholic messiahs. And they started torturing the Protestants heavily and exterminating them. The local people didn't understand that attitude because the Spanish king received a quarter of his income from the Netherlands. And the local people expected normal attitude towards them for that amount of money. So they started demanding equal rights with the Catholics. But the Spanish were very stubborn and they didn't give in. And when the local people realized they couldn't strike a deal with the Spanish, they started taking weapons to their arms and expelling the Spanish from their territory. In 1568, the 80 years independence war began. And the result of that independence war was the division of the Netherlands into a northern and the southern part. The northern part of the historic Netherlands is the country you're in now. And the southern part is Belgium and Luxembourg, or at least what is now, known nowadays as Belgium and Luxembourg. Biggest harbour of the country after Rotterdam, and also the fourth biggest harbour in Europe after Rotterdam, Antwerp and Hamburg. So as you can see, country houses in the Netherlands are very neat, are very well looked for, and the quality of the roads is as good as within the cities. As far as highways are concerned, their plan of the future Dutch highways was developed at the beginning of the 20th century, and territories were reserved for them. So there's no need to... Amsterdam's territory expanded at the end of the 19th century. Lots of well-to-do people started moving to the territories south to the former city wall, trying to escape the overpopulation and the pollution in the city center. And this area is considered has been considered the most fashionable one ever since. A big part of this area is covered by mansions constructed at the end of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. You will see the so-called tea houses near some of those mansions. Tea houses were a prestige object. If the tea houses were used for tea parties and also to drink alcohol in, and they were also a place where well-to-do male masters had sex with their female servants. So you can see one of those tea houses on your left. It's a small building with a grey cupola and with stairs. So you can see another former countryside, 17th century countryside house on your left, and you're about to see some more further on. As far as you can see, the water level is relatively high here, and so in order to escape floods, they use water pumps here to pump the water through when the water level becomes dangerously high. For example, in spring. You can see another tea house on your left again. And another former countryside mansion constructed in the 17th century. So the area of Amsterdam where the stadium is constructed was annexed by Amsterdam in 1966. And it became a very multi-ethnic area due to the fact that immigrants from Suriname, the former Dutch colony, started pouring in 1975. The population of Suriname is multi-ethnic itself. It consists of Native Americans, black people who descended from the former slaves, and also descendants of Indonesians and Indians that were recruited to work there in the 19th century. The local cuisine is also very mixed, and dishes from that country are very popular in the Netherlands. So Surinamese food restaurants are scattered throughout the country. We are about to leave the bus shortly to have a... So you can take pictures at the background of a windmill and also the monument to the famous Dutch artist Rembrandt, who flourished in the 17th century. I forgot to mention that when Amsterdam became the world trade capital at the end of the 16th century, the local merchants had enough money to buy objects of art, and that's why art started flourishing here. And the names of the Dutch artists like Jan Vermeer or Rembrandt or Frans Hals became famous all over the world. So as I've mentioned before, the Netherlands produces and exports lots of dairy products. But the Netherlands is also the largest exporter of flowers. So the story of the Dutch flower success began at the end of the 16th century, when the first tulip bulbs arrived in the Netherlands. They arrived here from Central Asia or Kazakhstan, where they still grow in the wild. But it was the Dutch who started appreciating the beauty of those flowers and started selecting them by the size, the shape and the color of their blooms. Lots of people don't even know nowadays that tulips don't grow in the wild nature in this country. But the climate turned out to be even more favorable for tulips in this country than in the countries where they come from originally. So we are about to leave the touring car, and you'll be having you'll have 10 minutes to take pictures of the Rembrandt Monument and the windmill on your left. No. At least not as a windmill. This would be this windmill was constructed in the 17th century. In the Netherlands a couple of decades ago, and they actually became a very invasive species, and they started even competing with the local birds and animals. Winters are relatively mild in the Netherlands, so it doesn't often freeze here in winter. There is little snow and it doesn't stay usually, so there is always enough food for parrots even in winter. The area of Amsterdam we are traveling through is the 8 Olympic Games were held in the city, and for the first time in the history of the modern Olympic movement, the Olympic flame was lit. But it wasn't lit by some celebrity, as they do it nowadays, but instead it was lit by an ordinary gas company worker. They didn't even preserve his name, so they just know it was an ordinary gas company worker, but he remained anonymous. And there wasn't a So as I mentioned before, this area of Amsterdam is inhabited by very well-to-do people for a big chunk. Please turn left behind the second, after the second crossing. Getting the newlywed to copulate in front of the video camera, to have sex.
Seriously?
Yeah. The thing is, it was a very liberal time, and John Lennon had released a new album shortly before the wedding, and with a picture of himself and Yoko Ono naked on the cover of the album. And so the journalists expected them to make a new logical step, as they thought. But the famous singer and his wife disappointed them. They just stayed in their bed, surrounded by pacifistic slogans, protesting against the Vietnam War. So we are about to leave the bus. Please remember to take your belongings you will need during the city tour, maybe some money to buy drinks, souvenirs, or snacks. And please be advised, there is a bike lane right to the place where we are about to get out of the touring car. So be very careful before crossing the bike lane.
Better when we walk further into the square. So as I've told you before, it's the biggest square in town. It's very often used for all kinds of political events. And people Sunday.
പാടാൻ തോന്നുന്നുണ്ട് അല്ലേ? അത് ഗിറ്റാർ പിടിച്ചത് പാടുന്ന പാടാൻ London music.
Under the Rijksmuseum is very often used by street musicians because of the type of the ceiling in the passage. It gives the place a very good acoustic qualities. I can hear some the southern Netherlands started pouring into the northern Netherlands, and lots of them wanted to pattern of Amsterdam's 17th century canal.
full of canals.
Sorry?
Full of canals. Canals, full of canals.
Yes, it's full of canals, yes. I've told you before. There are lots of canals in the city center.
They're all man-made.
Yes, all man-made. Amsterdam lies on a swamp, and so all buildings are supported by poles.
Oh, ചെരിവുണ്ട് എല്ലാത്തിലും ഒരു ചെരിവൊക്കെ തോന്നുന്നു ഇതാണ് ബിൽഡിങ് ആ ബിൽഡിങ് ചെരിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു അത് അങ്ങനെയാണ് സ്റ്റാമ്പിൻ്റെ മുകളിലുണ്ടാക്കിയത് സ്റ്റാമ്പ് ചെളിയുടെ മുകളിലുണ്ടാക്കിയത് പോൾസിൻ്റെ മുകളിലായിരിക്കുന്നു ആ താഴെ ഉള്ളിൽ വെച്ച് അങ്ങ് പോകുന്നു നമ്മളാണ് നടന്നങ്ങ് പോകുന്നത്
So this is yet another semicircle shaped canal. It's called Keizersgracht, the Emperor's Canal. And you can see another male fishing cubicle on the other side of the canal. So they were put there in the 19th century by the city hall. There are 40 of them, and they were scattered throughout the city because the local men like beer very much. And so when they've had enough beer, they can take a leak everywhere, just in the middle of the street, or have a leak in the canal. So the city hall decided it's better to make it in an orderly way. The women were neglected at the time because they were supposed to stay at home, get
ഇതാണ് ഇതൊരു വണ്ടി വരുന്നത്
western parts of the canals, and in the second half of the century, they started by that time, Amsterdam had been the World Trade Capital for 80 years. The local exactly the same. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, exactly. And nowadays, a piece of this canal is used for Amsterdam's world-famous flower garden. One cannabis and habits. About 400 coffee shops. Yes. This coffee shop is called the Dumpling, which means the atmosphere. The name of coffee shops often hints that people, after they get high, fly high with their brain. So to the atmosphere. This coffee shop has become world famous due to the fact that some Ocean 12 episodes were shot. So Brad Pitt, George Clooney, and Matt Damon's characters met at this coffee shop. So here they deliver goods to the king and the royal family. They used to say goodbye this time. Where, due to the dam across the river Amstel that was constructed at approximately that spot, with the white logos, most probably at the end of the 12th century to protect this facility from floods. And settlement at the time when the Dutch entrepreneur Gerard Philips saw those maps, he decided to implement that himself. You probably know the Gerard. The building on the other side of the square is the Royal Palace, but it was constructed in the 17th century when the Netherlands was a republic. It's the former city hall, and it was the biggest European city hall at the time because Amsterdam was the world trade center, so it should show off. There is a more than 27 years ago, and the Dutch version says God is calling you.
Oh.
God roept u. God roept u.
But God same, it is God only. In this Dutch language also.
God? Yeah, but it's pronounced differently. God. God.
God is calling you. God, Jesus loves you. ഇപ്പുറത്ത് ഫ്രഞ്ച് അല്ല ഡച്ച് ലാംഗ്വേജിലുള്ള God loves you. Jesus is calling now. God is calling.
This little lake is one of the two remnants of the former lower flow of the river Amstel after the dam was covered.
വഴി നോക്കി നീ താട് നോക്കിയാ നീ സിറ്റിയിലുണ്ട് അതിനുള്ളതല്ല പുള്ളിക്കറിയില്ല പുള്ളി വന്നപ്പോൾ മുതലുണ്ടോ
Have a safe flight back to India. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
ഇവിടെ സൈക്കിൾസ്
people are happy every time. So, question was, when is the happy hours? There is no. People drink. See, drinks are freely available, so there's no problem. It's freely available, right? It's part of the culture, so they don't have to wait for a happy hour. And this is true even in Paris. You realize it. It is congested during the daytime.
ഈ കാസിനോ അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയുള്ള ഈ സ്ഥലങ്ങളറിയില്ലേ അതൊക്കെ ഒത്തിരി ലേറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് അമേരിക്കയിലായിരിക്കും
refugee country. Traditionally these guys are not